Hello, I'm David Leal from London CND, and I want to talk about the New START treaty. It all sounds extremely academic, but it's a treaty which President Trump said he'll withdraw from, and this matters and is significant in terms of peace and the likelihood of war. Now, just at the moment, there are 1,550 nuclear warheads in Russia aimed at the United States, and an exactly the same number in the United States aimed at Russia. Now, this is massive overkill. Just to give you a sort of a feel, by the time you get to the 1,000th city in the United States, it's a small town in Florida about the size of Herne Bay. It really doesn't need a missile aimed at it. The whole thing is stupid. If all these missiles were fired, hundreds of millions of American and Russian citizens would die, and the resulting clouds of dust in the atmosphere would cause a nuclear winter, crops would fail, and maybe billions of people would die of starvation across the world. Now, the fact that there are exactly the same number of missiles on each side is, of course, not coincidence. It is what is laid down in the treaty, called New START, and it was signed by Obama and Medvedev in 2010. It's a treaty which has a 10-year life, and hence it's coming up for renewal, and President Trump says he's not interested in renewing it. Now, this matters. Just at the moment, we have Russian officers going to US air bases, US officers going to Russian air bases. They are conducting inspections. There can be no surprises. The whole thing is managed. It might be stupid, but it's managed just the same. And there's a parallel treaty called the Open Skies Treaty, which means that American spy planes can fly over Russia, Russian spy planes can fly over America. Again, there can be no surprises. Both sides know what the other side is doing. What this does is essentially it bureaucratizes mutual assured destruction. This is MAD, the acronym. It means that there can be no limited war between Russia and America. If war starts, everybody dies, or nearly everybody. As Khrushchev said, the living would envy the dead. This has been in place for 50, 60 years. The United States has repeatedly tried to get out of this, not of course by disarming, but by trying to have some sort of defense so that the Russians die, but we're okay. This was the Strategic Defense Initiative launched by Ronald Reagan in 1983. Everybody else called it Star Wars. The Americans have spent $300 billion on it since trying to get it to work. The latest incarnation is Trump's Space Force. Fortunately, it doesn't work. And the consequences of them getting it near to working is that the Russians will put all their weapons on more of a hair trigger. If the Russians think that their missiles can be shot down, then as soon as there's the slightest hint of anything coming towards them, they will fire all their missiles all at once in order to overwhelm any missile defense. So that the American missile defense makes us all much, much less safe. Now, going back to the beginning, there's been a whole series of treaties aimed at managing the arms race. It all began in 1954 with the Castle Bravo test on Bikini Atoll. It was a huge atomic explosion. It created vast amounts of radiation, and a Japanese fishing boat called the Lucky Dragon was caught up in it, and it arrived back in Japan with the crew, with one crew member died, all the other crew members were sick with radiation poisoning. Major sensation. And Eisenhower said, let's stop this. The Russians were also testing, the Soviets then also testing similar weapons, and Eisenhower said, let's bring this to a stop. And he was fought all down the line by what he termed the military-industrial complex. Now, he was not there long enough to win, but in 1963, Kennedy did manage to win against the military-industrial complex, and Kennedy and Khrushchev signed the first atmospheric test ban treaty. Now, since then, they've then moved on from stopping nuclear tests to at least to limiting the weapons, at least managing the numbers of weapons on each side, making sure there's no unconstrained arms race and no rhetoric about they've got more than us, there's a missile gap, etc., etc. And over the last years, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, George Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama have all signed treaties limiting nuclear weapons. And on the other side, there's been Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Gorbachev, Medvedev, and Putin. They all wanted to be seen as men of peace, get the photo op of them signing a treaty limiting nuclear weapons. And these treaties, SALT I, Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, SALT II, START, SALT, and finally New START, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. They've all revisions on the previous ones. Now, this hasn't actually all been progress, and the biggest setback to this was in 2002 when George W. Bush withdrew from the treaty outlawing missile defense. Nixon had signed that in 1972. He'd agreed with the Soviets that the Americans were not going to do that. This was a problem, and as I said, the Russian response is to put their weapons on more of a hair trigger, so they'll fire all at once. They won't wait a bit, see if the war happens gradually, because if they do, they're afraid that their weapons will be shot down. So what happens if New START dies? Well, there'll be an arms race. More will be done in secret. There will be more to go wrong. There will be more on a hair trigger. Why does Trump want to withdraw? Well, he's pointed out that there are new weapons which are not covered by the treaty, and this is indeed so. And it's why there have been a succession of treaties. There are new weapons. The treaty has to be revised to bring these weapons into scope. The Russians have got a whole lot of new nasties, including a nuclear-powered and nuclear-armed underwater drone, not covered at present by the current treaty. The treaty could well be revised to outlaw it, or at least count it and manage it, and so that the Americans know how many they've got and where they're deployed, etc. The other thing which Trump talks about is China. Well, actually, China is not playing this game at all. As I said, there are 1,550 strategic warheads on both sides. There are several thousand tactical warheads on either side, which are not covered by this treaty, and they're all for fighting a war in Europe or wherever, not for attacking Russia on one side or America on the other. So we're talking about many thousands of nuclear warheads. China has a few hundred. It doesn't play this game at all. If Trump insists that they're part of the treaty, well, you can understand what the Chinese response is. Well, we'll have thousands too. So, that's not really an issue. So what we have at the moment, as I said, is this madness, mutually assured destruction, but it's a bureaucratized madness. It is managed. I dare say Russian officers and American officers meet for the odd glass of vodka when they do their inspections. This is much, much better than having everything done in secret. Sadly, of course, we're neither Russian nor American. We can't directly influence the treaty, but we do have Trident, and you think, well, how does Trident fit into this? Well, not at all. Neither the Russians nor Americans really care about it. They have many thousands. This is only a few hundred warheads or a few tens of warheads. And so it's utterly, utterly irrelevant. All it does is adds extra complication makes things more likely to go wrong, make things more uncertain. So what we can do is get rid of Trident, and let's hope that they continue the treaty that manages the nuclear weapons until that happy day when they're done away with. Thank you.